senator from West Virginia is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Well, I want to begin by thanking the chairman of our EPW committee. We worked tremendously well together. You gave a great speech right there outlining not only the difficulties that we've had reaching consensus, but really how the building blocks of what we are embarking on today really came from the bipartisanship that we have shown in EPW with our surface transportation and our water bills. I think, you know, by having those building blocks in place has led us to where we are today. And I do remember that first meeting with President Biden in the White House. It's not every day you get to go to the White House and sit in the Oval Office and talk to the President of the United States and Vice President. But we started out with basically saying that we can do this, we want to do this, bipartisanship can work, particularly on areas that we've traditionally worked together on, but also on areas that are of critical need to our country. And we never really sort of lost our focus on that, and neither did the President. And so here we are today really meeting that challenge that he sort of laid down before us over the 6 months ago. And with the building blocks that us and Commerce and others have put into place, we find ourselves with the great hard work of the bipartisan group at a great place of a point at which we can discuss these, amend these, look at these on the Senate floor as we should be doing. So months of negotiating, the time is finally here. A lot of people and pundits said we'd never get here. As a matter of fact, I had an interview on national TV about 3 or 4 months ago when I was leading the effort for the Republicans, and the commentator said, well, I'll believe bipartisanship on infrastructure when pigs fly. So watch out. They are flying. So we are debating the historic bipartisan infrastructure bill. The Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act is the product of countless hours, as the chairman said, late nights, and more than a couple tough conversations. And I want to include not just our staffs, but a lot of staffs throughout the Senate, whether it's Finance Committee, Appropriations Committee, Commerce Committee, Banking Committee, EPW Committee, Energy Committee, all encompassing. A lot of our staff have been working through the weekends, sleeplessly, to try to get us to the day. We've debated the definition of infrastructure, and we actually talked about that in the White House the day we went to see the president, and what that scope should look like, and the price tag, and that very important how to pay for it. I think that nobody, probably, of the 100 of us thinks this bill is absolutely perfect. It never would be. And there's always a saying going around, if we all thought it was perfect, there's something wrong with it. So delivering for the American people is more important than our newspaper headlines today. We can make an historic investment in our nation's infrastructure with this bill. It reflects our commitment to keeping Americans safe, as the chairman mentioned, improving our global competitiveness, and growing our economy and creating jobs. This legislation gives states both the certainty in funding to plan for big projects, but also that flexibility in spending to cater to unique needs. What you need in Georgia, Mr. President, is different than what you need in Delaware, or my other colleague from Montana would differ from what we need in West Virginia. This bill is a product that the American people can be proud of, and one that will benefit them and the next generation. This is not a one and done. The impacts of this bill will go on through a generation. So after we had the meeting with the president, the bipartisan meeting, the president put out his American Jobs Act. And he actually challenged my party, the Republican Party, to come up with a reaction to his American Jobs Plan. And I took up that challenge, along with the ranking members of the relevant committees. So that would be Senators Wicker, Toomey, Barrasso, Crapo, and Senator Blunt. And we went back to the White House, and I was talking to Senator Carper the entire time through this process to make sure that our surface transportation bill, which we were in the midst of negotiating, was going to be the building block on which we could formulate a bipartisan agreement. And our drinking water and wastewater bill had already passed out of this entire body 89-2. So we decided, and the president was very much in the conversation and the will to get this done. Our Drinking Water and Wastewater Infrastructure Act had already passed, as I said, unanimously. We passed it on the floor, 89-2, and we were making steady progress on our Surface Transportation Reauthorization Bill. At this point, the talks between the President and me and our working group as Republicans began to falter, and the bipartisan group picked up with the President. I'm really glad and proud of their efforts that they were able to come to an agreement that is before us today. As I'm going to reiterate again, because I think we're going to be saying this a lot, I'm glad that the basis of this are the two bipartisan bills that came out of the EPW committee. There are several provisions I'd like to highlight as we begin this process. Roads and bridges are what we think of when we think of infrastructure. We've talked a lot about this over the last several months. As ranking member of the EPW committee, one of my top priorities, along with Chairman Carper, is the reauthorization of the Surface Transportation Reauthorization Bill. We worked painstakingly, and those were a lot of sleepless nights, too, for many of us and our staff in particular, to write a bill to meet our transportation needs. And the chairman outlined a lot of what his priorities were, and I'm going to talk about some of what the priorities that I had, sharing his priorities as well. I came to the table with several major priorities for that bill, and I'm proud to say that each one of them is in this bill that we're getting ready to consider. I wanted a robust investment in our nation's roads and bridges. Nothing bugs people more, literally, than driving into a pothole when they know they're paying a gas tax, when they know they're trying to do their best to support their state and local to repair their roads. But it is, I think, the least, that Americans, as they're going to work or going to school or going shopping, would expect that they could be safe as they're traveling. I came to the table and we did a robust $303.5 billion over 5 years for the federal aid highway programs, which, as the chairman said, is a 35% increase over current law. That investment represents historic funding. These are historic levels of funding for our roads and bridges, and provides the states that long-term certainty that they need to plan and complete a project. I'm sure, Mr. Chairman, you have projects in your state that have been on the burner, waiting to be done, are partially finished, and they can't get the investment because they can't get the long-term investment that we provided in our bill. So I have specifically made funding for our nation's bridges a priority. West Virginia has so many bridges. It's a small state, but we got a lot of hills and valleys, so we need a lot of bridges. One recent report said that 21% of West Virginia's bridges are in poor condition. Another report says that 13% of our interstate bridges are in poor condition. So that latter figure of the interstate bridges is the highest one in the nation. So our bill created a new bridge program. We worked hard with our colleagues to make sure that there is a massive infusion, which there is, on top of what we had in our bill in the appropriations package. The overall package includes $40 billion in dedicated resources for bridges. This is the single largest investment in bridge infrastructure since the construction of the interstate highway system. This is money that will make a difference for West Virginia and the rest of the nation. Second, I wanted to preserve the flexibility for our states and localities to use federal funds to meet their own unique transportation needs. That priority is reflected in the fact that 90% of the EPW bill's funding will be provided to our states through the formula. That means the predictability of the formula that every state has relied on over the last several transportation bills. That's important because it lets states use the federal dollars to address their own priorities. As I said, we have different priorities, from congestion in urban areas to economic growth in small towns. And third, I wanted to make sure that all parts of our nation, not just urban areas, but the rural areas, benefit from transportation grant programs. Rural areas can sometimes struggle when it comes to receiving competitive grants. It's hard to show cost-benefit analysis. It's hard to show how many people are being served, but these transportation corridors are so vital. That's why I'm very pleased that the EPW bill creates a new $2 billion rural grant program that will dedicate resources to something very important to me, the Appalachian Development Highway System, or the ADHS, and other critical projects across rural America. We also work together to provide additional dedicated funding for the ADHS in the broader legislation. So what does that mean for my home state? That means that this funding will aid the completion of Corridor H, which is the connector to the eastern and central parts of our state with the metro and DC area, and opening up more opportunities for economic growth and tourism. So if you're coming from the DC area, you can just slice right through the center of the state where you can ski, whitewater, see the beauty of our state, or bring your business. How about that? Finally, we hear a lot, everybody hears a lot from folks back home, that it just takes way too long to develop a project. We sometimes think the bureaucracy is our worst enemy when it comes to building our infrastructure. So we prioritized improvements for the project delivery process to help road and bridge projects advance from the planning stage to the completion stage much more rapidly. I'm excited about the reforms we had in our EPW bill. Particularly, our bill codifies the one federal decision policy, making it easier for project sponsors to work through the federal environmental review process. Not skirting any environmental review, but just expediting it so it can go quicker, which means more development, more considerations, but also more efficiency on how you spend your dollars. The EPW bill makes other common sense reforms, like allowing states to be reimbursed for utility relocation necessary for a project while the review process is ongoing, or even establishing deadlines for federal agencies to make decisions. These are a few examples of the 19 sections included in the robust project delivery section of our EPW bill. Additional provisions in the broader legislation will extend the FAST 41 permitting reforms to help us build other types of infrastructure more efficiently. So my key priorities: robust investment in roads and bridges, flexibility and certainty for our states, resources for rural communities and especially the ADHS, and project delivery improvements are all reflected in the EPW bill and across the broader package we are considering. I'm extremely proud of the work we did on our committee and to produce this, and I think it will make significant benefits to our nation's infrastructure. I'm also going to talk about our Drinking Water and Wastewater Infrastructure Act. The chairman went into more detail on it, but you can see it is very far-reaching, the largest, most robust investment and investment in new areas around this very crucial area. We authorized $35 billion for water projects across the country with a focus on upgrading aging infrastructure. It invests in innovative technologies and provides assistance to rural and low-income communities to help them keep their water safe and clean. The bill provides that flexibility I have talked about so that both rural and urban areas can best address their needs. The most significant investments are in the Drinking Water and Clean Water State Revolving Funds, otherwise known as SRFs. Our former governors in the body would know all about SRFs, how important they are. They maximize the authority for the states to determine how best to address their own challenges with a revolving loan fund to facilitate additional future investments. When this water legislation was voted on by the Senate, 89 senators supported it. Senators recognize that the legislation will help thousands of communities to improve their health, safety, and standard of living. And I'm very pleased that this bill before us again is a part of this package, a part of the larger package, so we can make sure that it gets to the President's desk. I'm glad that the overall package we are considering represents the largest investment in clean drinking water in our nation's history. It also has some niche things in there that are important to me, coming just that we hear anecdotally in our state, like we're wasting water in our state, or we have leaky old pipes that just leak out 50% of the water from the treatment facility to the home. What a waste. Think about our friends on the West and how precious water is in certain areas, what a wasteful thing that is. So we addressed some of that into our bill. There are a number of other provisions in this large package that will be significant wins for West Virginia and the nation. I launched my Capito Connect initiative in 2015 to help expand broadband infrastructure in West Virginia. Many communities that lack adequate broadband service are struggling economically. And I see my fellow senator from Montana, we have talked about this endlessly on the Commerce Committee and how absolutely important it is. Many communities that lack adequate broadband service are struggling. It is impossible to it is impossible to compete for new jobs if a community cannot offer good internet service. I mean, it's just a necessity, causing these areas to fall further and further behind. So today, education, tourism, healthcare, all require high-speed internet service. Broadband is core infrastructure, and this legislation recognizes that. It's a major broadband investment in this that will tremendously help close the digital divide in this country. We will get it to the last house. We will get it to the last business. Additionally, significant funding is included in this package to improve our nation's airports. Funding for the Corps of Engineers will improve our water resources infrastructure, our locks and dams. We rely a lot of that as you're going down the Ohio Canal, the Big Sandy, in through West Virginia. Reauthorization of the AML program will provide billions of dollars to clean up abandoned mine sites. Another new program will provide resources to clean up orphaned oil and gas wells. Both programs will have a positive effect in this country, and particularly in my state. The items I have highlighted are major wins for West Virginia and the nation. They're investments in the next generation, ensuring America continues to compete on the global stage. I'd like to thank Senators Portman and Sinema for their leadership on this legislation and the entire bipartisan working group for their hours and hours of long work. I'd especially like to thank, and we're going to be together a lot here in the next several days, my counterpart, Carper Diem, Chairman Carper of the EPW Committee. I'd also like to thank President Biden for his commitment and his willingness to see this bipartisan work product through. I would like to add that I would like to thank the President's staff, because I know that they have committed hours and hours to this effort, beginning with me and ending where we are today. I hope this isn't the end. I mean, I hope this is the beginning of things that we're going to be doing together. I hope this isn't a one and done. I hope this is the beginning of all good things. The American people elected us to do this tough work. Tough compromises are necessary to develop and pass bipartisan bills, and I believe this legislation is a major positive step. I look forward to working with my colleagues as we begin the amendment process so that we can advance this package. Mr. President, I would like to join with Chairman Carper in thanking our staff members who have worked so hard on the EPW bill. You mentioned, I see your staff over there and part of my staff over here. At the risk of picking one of my favorite children off the EPW committee, I'm going to name my entire staff because they all had a hand in this. So I'd like to thank Lauren Baker, Murphy Barrett, Libby Calloway, Georgiana Clemens, who's going to be a mom in about a month, Marley Collier, Travis Cohn, Sarah DeLevin, Will Dixon, Elizabeth Horner, Max Hyman, Tyler Jenkins, Jess Kramer, Jake Kennedy, Matt Lupus, Kayla McMurray, Taylor Meredith, Jacob Mitchell, Kelly Moore, Catherine Smith, and my staff leader, Adam Tomlinson. I will give him an extra check because he's an amazing person. Travis Voiles and Andy Zook for their tireless efforts that have helped advance this committee's infrastructure legislation. On my personal office team, I'd like to thank my Chief of Staff, Joel Brubaker, and J.T. Jazierski for their leadership. But I also want to thank your staff. We've worked really well. You and I work well together, but our staffs really do, I think, rely on one another, and that's the way it should be. I would like to especially thank Mary Frances Repko because she has devoted many hours and times. She and Adam, I don't know how many times they talked on the phone, but it's